Hey students, this video is for our next element of art, which is on value. So as you learned about when you watched the video on value, value is all about the lightness and darkness of a work of art or of an object or a color. So when we're talking about value, the easiest way to represent value is in a value scale where you see it go from dark to light and then have everything in between. And we get a really good sense of what kind of value means, that lightness and darkness of an object or of something. So you can see that I've structured the paper a little bit differently for you all this week, and that's just because we are going to add two value scales that are going to be 10 inches long along the bottom here, and that's going to be for our examples of value, and that I just needed to rearrange things a little bit so that we still have a good rectangle to use for our drawing example, which is going to be here. So this is still where you have notes and your definition written down for value, and then let's go ahead and do those value scales. So for this assignment, you're going to want definitely at least a pencil. You also need a pen of some kind or colored pencil. You can use so if you don't have any colors or colored pencils, you are welcome to use just like a ballpoint pen. If you have Sharpie, you can use a Sharpie or any other kind of pen if you have like one of these kinds of pens. Those work totally fine as well. So that's up to you. That's for our second value scale. And then you also want a ruler or at least something to draw a straight edge. This is optional, so you do not have to measure and get this exactly right, but I do want you to do a 10-inch value scale with at least 10 sections. So the easiest way to do this is to measure and have each section be 1 inch by 1 inch, and they're going to be here along the bottom, but it's not super important for everything to be just exactly as accurate as possible. That's not really the part that I'm worried about. So let's go ahead and do a 1 inch by 10 inch value scale, and we're going to add two of these here. So I'm going to go ahead and just start by doing this, and this is really pretty easy because I can just kind of trace this here. Okay, so there we've got two value scales. Now this top one here is going to be in pencil. So I'm just going to label that pencil. And then the bottom one, you can decide. You can, if you have colored pencils and you want to try this with color, go ahead and do the color for the bottom one. You would just want to pick one color. So it could be like blue or red or green or purple or something. And just do that, use that exact same pencil to create your value scales. It's going to be the same exact process as with a regular pencil, so I'm going to show you that in a moment here. And then I'm actually going to show you how to do it with a pen. So for those of you who don't have any colored pencils with you, but you do have a ballpoint pen, I'm assuming that everyone hopefully has some sort of ballpoint pen or a Sharpie or something laying around the house. Ask your parents. They probably have a pen available to you. Any kind of pen will work. So that's your other option for down here. So I'm going to let you go ahead and label. I'm going to label this because I'm going to do pen here, okay? So with a value scale, when you are making a value scale, you always want to start with the darkest box, and then this one at the very other end is going to be the lightest, which is going to be left completely white, okay? So your goal with this is to shade. So the way that we create value with a pencil is by shading, right? So often students think of value as shading, but value is a lot more than just shading, right? Shading is one way that we create value, and it's the way that we create value using a pencil or a colored pencil. But value can be created in lots of different ways, including just it's lightness and darkness of anything. So when we're looking at our world and we see that there is light, then there's always shadow, there's always lighter areas and darker areas of things. Anytime there's light, there is value. So that's what we mean when we say value. It's a much more broader understanding of it than just shading. Okay, so let's go ahead and do this with a pencil. I'm going to start with the darkest one here. So my goal with this is to make this box as dark as possible. And the way that I do that is by pressing hard with the pencil, so giving it a good amount of pressure. And my goal is also even and consistent. So really even shading and filling in the entire area. So the other part of this is that you see I'm using a wooden pencil, and this definitely works best with a wooden pencil versus a mechanical pencil. You can, if all you have is a mechanical pencil, you can make this work. It's just a little bit trickier, and you're probably not going to get that same sort of smooth, consistent value that you would get with a wooden pencil. So let's talk about why for a second here. Mechanical pencils are great because they are always sharp, right? You click the lead and it always comes out sharp and it's there and ready for you to use. Now, when we're doing shading, we actually really want a little bit more of a dull lead, and we also want to be able to access the edge of the pencil so that we can get some really nice smooth, flat values that don't see any of the lines that we use to create the value. So when you're doing your value scale, your goal again is this is really smooth and even and consistent. And so as you get lighter, as these boxes get lighter and lighter, using the edge of the pencil is going to help you out with that significantly. So here I'm using the edge and you can see that I don't see any individual lines, whereas if I was using the tip, I would start to see those individual lines. Now when you're shading it in as completely and dark as possible, you use whatever part of the pencil you can to make that happen. But as things get lighter and lighter, then you really want to utilize that edge of the pencil. So let's go ahead and keep working on this value scale. So the goal being to have such a really smooth transition from a dark to light so that we don't see, we don't want to have two boxes the same. So we really want to see that transition. All right, let's do this. Okay, so as you can see from watching me shade that, I had to go back into my darker ones quite a bit in order to really get the sense of these being darker. Now, our tendency when we do a value scale is to go too light too quickly, or if we start from light to dark, then we end up going too dark too soon. So that's why we always start with the darkest square, is because we can always make things darker, but it's much harder to make a square lighter. Like I would have to go in with an eraser to make anything lighter, and that would be really frustrating. So much easier, start with the darkest one, and then you kind of start and add like a lighter layer, and then you layer over it until you get the nice transition of dark to light throughout your value scale. Again, this one is going to be left white, so don't do any shading there. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and learn about how to do this with a pen. Now, shading is relatively easy because with the pencil, all we're doing to make it darker is we're pressing harder, right? But with a pen, like a ballpoint pen, like we could press as hard as we want, and it's still going to be about the same value. So the way that we create value with a pen or a marker or a Sharpie or anything that's going to maintain the same value is we need to think of the lines, and you're creating a whole bunch of lines. So for example, hatching. So one way to do this is through hatching. Now with hatching, you have lots of different lines, and the lines are parallel. So they're all going the same direction. And with when you're creating a darker value with hatching, that means that the lines get closer and closer and closer together, and they appear darker. And then as it's getting lighter and lighter, they are farther and farther apart. So that's how you get this sense that it's a lighter and darker value. So, and you can do the lighter and darker value in lots of different ways. It doesn't have to be hatching or cross-hatching. There's also stippling. There's also just any types of lines, like a scribble line or different types of shapes that you might put together. But the same concept is there. So the closer they are together, the darker they appear. The farther apart they are, the lighter in value they appear, okay? So let's go ahead and do this value scale. Again, we're gonna go from dark to light, and we're gonna do hatching. And then I'm gonna add a little bit of cross-hatching just so you can see what that looks like. And you can either do hatching or cross-hatching for this value scale. All right, let's go. Okay, so there we can kind of get a sense of this going from progression from dark to light. Again, this box remaining white, and then each of these lines again going in the same direction. Now we would want this to be a little bit darker if possible, and that's where I'm going to show you with cross-hatching you can go in just a little bit darker. So basically with cross-hatching you're doing hatching, which is one direction, and then you crisscross lines going the opposite direction. So go ahead and cross over. Okay, so you can get that idea that the farther apart those lines are, then the lighter and lighter that value becomes. Okay, so after you do those two value scales, and I kind of smudged this a bit, look, I've got some smudge of pencil on my hand. Now you're gonna go ahead and do your drawing using value. So for this, you know, again, you can use just pencil. If you want to do shading, you can use color as always. Colored pencil is the best way to create value with color. You can't really do that with marker. So unless you are doing like cross-hatching types of things with marker, it's very hard to show value with just marker. So colored pencils are really the way to go with that. Or a regular pencil. So again, showing value in some way. One thing I will say about value is that if you do something like a landscape, the one way to make things look like they are getting farther away is to do what's called atmospheric perspective. And that's where you have things that are in the foreground are darker in value, and then they get lighter and lighter and lighter. So you could, for value here, do like a landscape where you just have layers of mountains getting lighter and lighter, and it is really, they can look really beautiful because value is really beautiful, and then it also very clearly shows that those mountains are receding and getting farther and farther away, just with it getting lighter and lighter in value. So I'm not going to draw anything for you here. I want you guys to come up with your own thing. I just showed you a whole bunch of with the value scales. So draw something, draw anything you want. Start thinking about ways to put a complete image together, so it's not just examples of value, but that they are actually drawings that kind of fit and make sense, creating a scene of some kind, or a person, or animals, or whatever you want it to be. Or maybe it's an abstract composition. That's okay too. Okay, so however you want to do it, think about how the lines and the shapes and the forms will all fit together, and then how value plays a role with all of that. All right, happy drawing!